On this week's episode of the podcast, should I use a debt consolidation company?
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, the owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I want to get to my topic about debt settlement companies. But before I get there, I wanted to bring up now two things with you. So those of you that are longtime listeners know that the show is sponsored by our friend Sam Cohen at Attorneys First Insurance. And so if you are a title agent or a lawyer and you're interested in errors and omissions insurance, or you're worried about whether you have enough coverage, it's time for renewal, and you're wondering, is your renewal consistent with your previous policy? Give Sam a buzz. If Sam cannot save you some money, he won't quote you insurance. And if you have questions about what your policy actually covers, Sam can help you with that as well. You can reach him at sam@attorneysfirst.com or www.attorneysfirst.com. So it's Sam at Attorneys First Insurance, but all the contact information is attorneysfirst.com, either sam at or www.attorneysfirst.com. The second thing that I wanted to bring to you is something exciting happening with the Crushing Debt Podcast. I've created a landing page. So all of you listening, or most of you listening, probably not necessarily for you, but what the landing page does is if you go to SeanMYesner.com, so my name, SeanMYesner.com/subscribe. So again, the website is SeanMYesner.com/subscribe. What that'll do is that'll give you a link where I will email you the top 3 most popular episodes of the Crushing Debt Podcast, the top 3 most downloaded episodes of the Crushing Debt Podcast. And so just a little gift for those of you that have been listeners for a while. Some of these episodes are no longer available on iTunes or Apple Podcast. I think Apple Podcast only displays the top 200, and some of the other podcast aggregators may only list the top 200 or so podcast episodes. And so this will give you my top 3 most popular, my top 3 most downloaded, and some of them may not be in the last 200 episodes. So it'll be an opportunity for you to listen to some shows maybe in the past that you haven't listened to yet. So again, the website is SeanMYesner.com/subscribe. And if you go there, you can give me your email address, and in exchange, I'll email you the top 3 most popular, the top 3 downloaded episodes of the Crushing Debt Podcast. So what I wanted to talk about today, I get a lot of questions about debt settlement companies, and frankly, I get a lot of referrals from debt settlement companies. And so I really don't want to bash them necessarily. I do think that they can serve a valuable purpose, but I want you all to do your due diligence if you're going to use a debt settlement company. So what do I mean by a debt settlement company? A debt settlement company is one of those companies that you pay them on a monthly basis, and in exchange, they negotiate away your debt. Now, sounds like a good idea. You know, I take all of my minimum payments from all my credit cards, and maybe I'm paying $1,500 or more in minimum payments on all my credit cards. But I can hire this debt settlement company, and I can make one payment of $750, and over the course of time, they will then negotiate away all those other credit cards. And so not only have I cut my payment in half, and that's, you know, some of them, maybe it's $800, maybe it's $500, maybe it's $900, whatever, but I've cut my payment significantly from the $1,500 that I pay on all my minimum payments. And then these debt settlement companies collect that money and negotiate with your credit card companies. Now, here's the bad about those companies, and let me get that out of the way first. Let me get that out of the way quickly first. So the bad thing is, a lot of times these companies will tell you that you need to fall behind if they're going to settle their debt for you. Maybe you're current on your minimum payments when you approach these companies, and they tell you you have to fall behind. As an attorney, I don't think it's ethical, and I will never tell you to fall behind on a debt that is current. Now, what I will tell you is that if I'm going to settle the debt for you, and I'll get to that in a little bit, and I'll get to why we're different than a debt settlement company, but if I were to settle your debt for you, I will not tell you to fall behind. Now, what I will tell you is that the incentive for the creditor, the incentive for the credit card company to take less is gone if you're current on your payments. So while I feel it's not ethical to tell you to intentionally fall behind on your payments, I'm also going to tell you that I may not be able to effectively do my job when you're current. But let me be clear, the decision to fall behind is up to you. And if you fall behind, knowing the pros and the cons and the consequences, then know that lawsuits could come, garnishments could come, judgments could come, telephone calls, all these nasty things that creditors do to try to collect their payment. Those things are going to happen. And if you decide I want to try to settle my debt, but I am current right now in my payments, and you decide to intentionally fall behind, you may set yourself on a path where debt settlement or maybe even bankruptcy is a possibility if you cannot settle your debt. The other con to a situation like this is that the debt settlement company a lot of times will take its fee from the payments that you pay. So in my first example, if you're paying $750 a month, it's possible that the debt settlement company is taking some portion or all of that payment for its own fee until its fee is paid, and then it's putting money aside to pay your creditors. So you really want to be careful about a situation like that. If you're going to pay the debt settlement company, you want to make sure that they're going to put aside some money to pay your creditors, because once you start falling behind, if you start falling behind again on your debts, you're going to need to get some of those debts settled pretty quickly. You want to make sure and do your due diligence. You want to make sure to look up this company on the internet. You want to make sure you run this company through the Better Business Bureau, maybe even through ripoff reports, or take this company's name and put it in, type the company name and then type complaints after that. And it'll send you to any pages that contain complaints about the particular debt settlement company that you're interested in going with. Now, again, many of them are good, and the ones that are good will be honest with you. They'll be transparent up front. They'll talk to you. There'll be a person that you can call rather than some kind of 800 number. Maybe it's its own company. A lot of these companies are set up as multi-level marketing companies, so they're really not set up to negotiate away the debt. They're more set up to have you work and get other people in the downline. And so that's, maybe a fantastic business opportunity, and maybe the additional income will help you to negotiate away your debt. But the focus of this company should be in eliminating your debt and not in setting up your downline of MLM participants. So those are some of the things you want to make sure of. Those are some of the things you want to include in your due diligence. And I'll go through, I've got my notes here as I do today's episode. I'll go through more pros and cons as we do this. Now, obviously, the pro of a company like this, you're going to cut your payments and you're going to eventually settle away your debt. Now, one of the problems that these companies face is that it's like a house of cards. And so if you have a lot of debt, they are all going to have to be settled. Otherwise, this plan isn't going to work. And think about it like a house of cards. If you've got 5 credit cards and this company can only negotiate away 3 of them, well, you're still going to have 2 cards that you have to address at some point. And that's maybe when it comes to me to try to settle these as a lump sum, or even maybe when it comes to me to file bankruptcy. So you want to make sure, if you have a lot of creditors, if you have a lot of credit cards, a plan like this may not be the best idea for you. But again, I want to encourage you all to do your due diligence. If you have questions, give me a call. We can go over some of the options, and I'll tell you yes or no, whether you're in Florida or not. I'll tell you yes or no, what kind of due diligence, what kind of red flags to look for these different companies. Now, I can only represent you if you're in Florida, but if you're outside of Florida, certainly give me a call. I love talking to listeners. I'm always available, maybe depending on schedule. I'll always fit time in my schedule to talk to listeners of the show. So if you're listening to this show and you want to go over an offer that you've received from a debt settlement company, give me a call. Whether you hire me or not, whether I can represent you or not, anything we talk about is confidential. I cannot and will not repeat it. So if you have questions about due diligence, then please give me a call. So when you're working with these companies, another thing to look out for, another question that I have here in my notes, what will my creditors settle for? Now, as an attorney, I'm never going to give you any kind of promise. Now, my average is around 30 to 40%, meaning if you owe a company $10,000, I can normally get it settled for 3,000 to 4,000, somewhere in that range. Now, keep in mind that's not a promise, and keep in mind that is also an average. So if my average is 30 to 40%, that means I have a handful of cases where I've been able to settle the debt at 20%, at 0%, and there's other cases where I haven't been able to settle the debt for less than 80% or 90%. In fact, I remember two extremes. So I recently had a client that owed, I want to say it was somewhere in the range of $37,000 and was being sued for that amount of money. I ended up settling the case. Now, it's a long story that I don't necessarily have time to go into here, but I settled the case for $1. Obviously, a huge percentage discount, 99% or more percentage discount, probably, if I'm doing the math in my head. So who knows? But I settled $37,000 for $1. And it's a long story. It has to do with who the creditor is, and the creditor was purchased. The plaintiff in the lawsuit was purchased by someone else, and there's some other factors going on there. But still, factually, I settled a case where $37,000 was owed, and I settled it for $1. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I've settled cases before with American Express, which I'll talk about here in a minute, for 90% of what was owed. And so that was the minimum that they would take, was 90%. And, I couldn't get them any lower than that. In another case I can recall off the top of my head, I was able to get American Express down to about 85%. But, that creditor, American Express, doesn't settle for 30 to 40% unless there's unusual, extenuating circumstances. So you definitely want to talk with the person that's going to be settling your debt to get some idea of what percentage they would settle for, which brings up another point. So debt settlement companies are good, but you're going to have to be able to save up money every month in order to pay them, in order to pay the creditor. And so if you do owe $10,000 and I get a settlement offer of $3,000, well, you need to have that $3,000 saved up. There is an opportunity where maybe we can negotiate and get that creditor to take monthly payments. But even then, you're going to have to be able to make the monthly payments. And if I was able to settle them at $3,000 on a lump sum payment, chances are it's going to be more on a payment plan. And so if it was a lump sum of $3,000, maybe they want $5,000 or $5,500 or $6,000 through a payment plan over time. Now, again, these are not guarantees. These are not absolutes. Every creditor is different. Every borrower is different. Every situation is different. So, it's really a fact-intensive conversation that we need to have, and your results, your mileage may vary depending on the creditor, depending on the attorney, depending on the situation. So I do want you to be aware of that. Which brings me to my next question. Is it better to settle the debt in full, or is it better to make monthly installments? Is it better to settle the thing in full, or is it better to make monthly installments? And again, that really depends on you and your scenario. So if you have the ability to pay it off in one lump sum, then I think the benefit there is you'll probably pay it off for less than if you make monthly payments, like I said before. Plus, it'll be off your shoulders that much quicker. So if I can settle the $10,000 debt today for $3,000 and I have the $3,000 and I send it, it's over. I don't have to worry about that debt ever again. If I settle it for $5,500 a month for 10 months, well, I got to worry about that debt for the next 10 months, and I got to figure out how I'm going to come up with an extra $500 a month for the next 10 months. Now, if that's in exchange of or in place of a $750 minimum payment, well, then, I'm saving $250 a month. It shouldn't be that difficult. But especially now as I record this and we're still deep into COVID and we still really have no end in sight, I think there is maybe a light at the end of the tunnel, but who knows? So even in these uncertain times, do you want to commit to some long-term monthly payment plan? So that's the pros of a payment in full. Now, the pros of a payment plan is obviously instead of parting with $3,000, I only need to part with $500 a month. So it makes it a little bit more affordable in a situation where that lump sum installment is not available. Typically on a payment plan settlement, I can still get some discount on the amount that's owed. And so I'm typically still not paying back the full amount, but I'm paying, some lesser amount than the full amount that's owed. And so Is it better to settle in full or make monthly payments? I think that really depends on your income and your ability to save up a lump sum. Now, where could you get that lump sum? Maybe family can help loan it to you. Maybe friends can help loan it to you. I would not necessarily suggest, especially if you're here in Florida, I would not necessarily suggest refinancing your home, pulling on a line of credit on your home, pulling from a retirement account. I wouldn't necessarily suggest doing that to come up with the lump sum. And the reason that I say that is because those assets are exempt. So your home is exempt. So if you owe Visa 10 grand and Visa says, we'll take 3 and go away, and you refinance your house to come up with the $3,000, well, Chase cannot take your house away. So if all it was that you owed Chase the $3,000 or the $10,000 in Florida, they cannot take your house away. That's in the Constitution. That's in the Florida statutes. They cannot take your house away. Now, the problem is if you refinance your house or you take out a modification or you pull money on your home equity line of credit and you pay Chase the $3,000 and now Chase is out of the picture. But now you have that mortgage to pay. And guess what? If you don't pay your mortgage, they can definitely foreclose against your house. Now, a lot of people say, well, the second can't foreclose. They're second in line. I have my first mortgage with whatever bank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Regions, SunTrust, Truist, whatever. And then I have this second mortgage. The second mortgage can't foreclose. Absolutely, yes, they can. The second can foreclose and take the house away from you. Now, the second takes that house subject to the first mortgage. And so if the second doesn't sell it to somebody or find someone that's going to take over that house and pay the first mortgage, then the first mortgage is also going to foreclose and take the house away from whoever bought it from the second mortgage. But my point there is the second mortgage can foreclose. And so if you're looking at taking this lump sum balance and putting it on your home equity line of credit, I would typically suggest against that because the second mortgage can foreclose and take your house away. Now, again, let's have a conversation about it because every scenario is different. Every fact pattern is different. And so maybe it is a situation where if all it is $3,000 and your home equity line of credit has a minimum $100 payment, well, now you could pay $150 or $200 or $300 a month, and that would be much lesser than, in my made-up example, the $500 a month to settle with the credit card company directly. So you pay, $100 or $200 or $300 on your second mortgage instead of $500 to the creditor directly, and therefore you saved yourself another $200 a month. So there may be a situation where putting it on the line of credit is possible, but in order for me to recommend a strategy like that, you're going to have to do a lot of convincing so that I'm convinced that this is the best option for you. But again, let's talk about it. Contact me. You can email me. We can set up a phone call. Let's talk it out. Very similar reasons I would also suggest against pulling this from a retirement account. And it's a similar concept. Again, you owe Chase $10,000. They're not going to be able to force your retirement account away from you, especially if you're in Florida, to take that $10,000. If you pull $3,000 from your retirement account and use that to pay Chase, now Chase is gone, that's good, but now you're going to incur a penalty by taking that $3,000 out of your retirement account. And so you really want to be careful. What are the tax consequences? Now, what some people will remind you of, and what I will remind you of, is that at least right now, while we're still dealing with COVID, at least I believe until October, I think. But again, give me a buzz. We'll double check. I think you can withdraw for certain things from a retirement account without penalty. So you definitely want to talk to your financial advisor about that, and you definitely want to make sure what the tax consequences or what the penalties are going to be if you withdraw from a retirement account. But you can absolutely do that, I believe, right now during COVID without penalty. But again, you're sacrificing a little bit of your future. That's $3,000 less you're going to have to build up in the retirement account. That's $3,000 less you're going to have for your future. In my made-up example, instead change the facts. Instead of a $10,000 loan with a $3,000 settlement, make it a $100,000 loan with a $30,000 settlement. Do you still want to take that type of a chunk out of your future, out of your retirement account, when the creditor cannot get at that money anyway. So again, one thing you really, really want to be careful of is the consequences, not only the tax consequences, but also the penalty consequences of pulling from your retirement account early to generate the money to pay off a debt that wouldn't be able to pull it from your retirement account anyway. The other issue that you need to consider is also a tax issue as well. And so when you settle this debt, it's $10,000 and you settle it for $3,000, you are going to knock $7,000 off the balance that you owe. That brings up 1099 issues, forgiveness of debt income issues. So you're also going to want to talk to your CPA as well to figure out what are the tax consequences. Now, maybe if you are deemed to be insolvent by the IRS's calculations, that $7,000 won't be too much of an impact on you. And again, remember, it's taxes on that $7,000. It's not $7,000 of tax. And so, again, if you're in a 30% tax bracket, let's say, and you save $10,000 forgiveness of debt income, simple math, go to your CPA to understand this more fully, but you would pay around $2,100 in tax. $7,000 times 30%, about $2,100 in tax. Now, if you normally get a $5,000 refund, well, that means your refund's only going to be $2,900 instead of $5,000. And so in that type of a scenario, it may not hurt you that much. It may be a good situation. But again, like with the home equity line of credit, you're going to have to do a little bit of convincing if you want me to support a plan where you pull from an exempt asset to pay off a general unsecured debt. You're going to have to do a little bit of convincing with me. That's not to say that it's wrong in every event. That's not to say that it's right in every event. Let's talk it out. Let's figure it out. Give me a call and we can do that. The last thing, actually a couple more things I want to talk about here. So one of them is, can I negotiate the credit card debt myself? Do I need to use a debt consolidation company, a credit consolidation company? Do I need to use you, Sean, or another attorney? Isn't this something I can do myself? And, I've said a lot of times, what I do is not necessarily rocket science. You can do this yourself. Now, here would be my suggestion, however. I can do my taxes myself. My undergrad degree was in accounting, for crying out loud. I can do my own taxes myself. But why would I want to take that time and expense and effort and energy when I have a CPA, my father, frankly, who can do my tax returns for me? And even then, I know some of the CPAs in this area in Tampa Bay will only charge a few $100s less than the refund that I would normally get to do my tax returns, both for the business and personally. So I could pay a CPA, a couple of $100, $300, $500, $750, $1,000 to do my tax return, still get a decent refund that would cover that fee to the CPA. And then while that's going on, I don't have the headache. I don't have the pressure. I don't have to sit here in front of the computer when I should be working to do my tax return. I don't have to sit here in front of the computer when I should be out with my family to do the tax return on the weekend. So I can hire a CPA to do it for me. Let me get something even less complicated than that. When I first started learning to drive, my dad made sure that I knew where the oil filter was, I knew how to check the oil, and I knew how to change the oil if necessary. So I am completely capable, and especially now in this day of YouTube, I could pull up a YouTube video, and I am perfectly capable of changing my own oil. But why would I want to do that? Why would I want to get messy? Why would I want to, lay outside and sweat and do all that stuff when I can bring it to the dealership, or I can bring it even to one of these, 10-minute oil change places, and for, again, less than $100, get my oil changed, and I'm on my way inside of, a half hour, versus climbing under the car, having, one day I'm going to show my boys how to change the oil as well, because it's something that I want them to know how to do. I'll teach them how to change the oil. I'll teach them how to change a tire. But again, all of this stuff I pay for so that I can focus on other things that'll either make me money or better my relationship with my friends or my family, or even to sit and read a book and further my own knowledge. Another example I use is mowing the lawn. Again, I go back to my childhood. I mowed the lawn as soon as I could push the lawnmower, my father had me mowing the lawn and cleaning the pool. Now, as soon as I left for college, he hired someone to do it. And it's the same concept. My dad didn't want to mow the lawn. My dad didn't want to clean out the pool. So he hired someone else to do it. But it's the same concept. There have been many, many pre-COVID weekends where my wife has said, hey, let's go out. And yeah, absolutely, let's do it. Let's go to the beach. Let's go to Busch Gardens. Let's go, the children's museum. Let's go to the aquarium. Let's do something for the boys. But if I had to mow the lawn, I wouldn't be able to go with them. So it's not a function of can I do it? It's a function of where's my time better spent. And so what I would suggest to you, if you're saying I've got all this debt, I want someone to help negotiate it away. Well, one of the benefits of coming to me, and one of the benefits of even using a debt settlement company, is that we don't have the same emotional investment in the debt. So I tell people I am emotionally invested in you, and I am emotionally invested in the best outcome for you, but I'm not emotionally invested in this debt. I could care less about Chase and their 10 grand. I want to get the best result for you, where you are too emotionally connected potentially to this issue. And so are you smart enough to do it? Absolutely. Do you have the negotiation skills to do it? Probably. Do you have the time to do it? Maybe. Are there other things you could be doing with your time? Could you be making more money to generate the $3,000, for example, that I'm going to need to settle out your debt? So that's another consideration to think of when you think to yourself, well, I could just do it myself. Why would I want to hire you to do it? Well, this is what I do for a living. So I could change my oil, but I take it to the 10-minute oil change place. I can mow my lawn, but I pay $50 a month to have a company come out and do it, or $100 a month to have a company come out and mow my lawn so that it's something I don't have to worry about. Now, again, you better believe that when my sons get old enough to push a lawnmower, maybe I invest the $400 or $500 in a new lawnmower, stop that stream of payments to the lawn company, and have my boys do it. But for now, when they're too young, yeah, save the time. Am I smart enough to do my taxes? Absolutely. Could I manage my way through the forms? Absolutely. But why? When I have someone that'll do it for free, or someone that'll do it to allow me to do something else more productive or better with my time, effort, and energy. So can I negotiate the credit card debt myself? Yeah, you can. Should you? Is actually the question that I would ask. And I think you all know how I would answer that question. So a few more topics I wanted to bring up here. So how do I negotiate with all these companies? You know, you said earlier, Sean, that American Express typically doesn't settle for 80 or 90%. So how do I negotiate with them? And here's an interesting thing. I file a lot of bankruptcies for people, but I would not suggest that you, quote, threaten American Express or any creditor with bankruptcy. A lot of creditors are now taking the position that, if the way I've always heard it said, if you're feeling froggy, go ahead and jump. In other words, if you think that bankruptcy is going to be the better way out, go for it. And we, as the creditor in this example, will file our claim in bankruptcy court and we'll get paid that way. So I don't know that filing bankruptcy is really the right thing. I also wonder, especially in this day and age, is mentioning COVID the right thing? Or if you happen to be listening to this and there's some other thing going on, there's hurricanes spinning in the Gulf right now or tropical storms. I don't know that I would say what, quote, the herd is saying, unless maybe it's true. So if you did lose your job because of COVID, if your house was damaged because of a hurricane or a fire or something like that, I would mention that kind of stuff. I just wouldn't rely on it. I would put more behind it. In other words, you got to remember that even though these are people on the other side trying to collect your debt, they're also human. And you've got to remember that they've heard everything before. So what's unique to your situation? Did your spouse have some kind of medical event that they cannot work anymore, and so your income is dropped drastically? Did you get a divorce? Did you lose your job? If you are dealing with COVID, what are your medical bills? So don't just say, I need you, Chase, to settle this $10,000 debt for $3,000 because I have COVID. I would say, I need you to settle this $10,000 debt for $3,000 because I spent 2 weeks in a hospital, one of those weeks on a respirator, dealing with COVID. And because of that, I lost my job. And so now my income is a lot less and I'm getting the unemployment, but, and on and on. And none of that is true. Luckily, knock on wood here on the desk, I have not experienced COVID. I've had plenty of friends who have and plenty of colleagues who have. But I'm just giving you sort of an example of what you might say to one of these debt settlement companies. I remember when I settled away some debt a while back when our kids were born, one of the things I said to the settlement company was, look, my wife is no longer able to work because she just had the baby. So our income has been dramatically reduced. Now, at the time I settled one of these debts, my father had just had a medical event himself and was getting some Aflac. And so what I said to the creditor was, listen, my dad is in a better place than I am. He's going to give me some of his Aflac money, but that's really all we have to settle out our combined medical debts. So, creditor, would you take? And I've told the story before on the show. It was a $4,000 medical debt, and I got them to take $1,200. I forget if it was over 3 payments of $400 or 4 payments of $300, but one of the things that I brought up with the debt settlement company, not with the debt settlement company, I apologize. One of the things I brought up with the creditor directly was, hey, my wife is no longer working in the short term because, she's on maternity leave. My father just had this medical issue, so he can't give me all the money, but he can loan me some of it. My business is doing this and that. My revenue has dropped X percent. My sales have dropped X percent. And tell the creditor what's going on in a way that as a human, they can support your request. Now, it's not going to work in every case, but that's probably your best case scenario in terms of how to negotiate. They want to know what your hardship is. Why are you having trouble paying them? And a lot of them will work with you. Now, whether they'll settle it, who knows? That's very factual intensive. But again, that's what I would do is I would negotiate with that creditor, bring up your hardship. Again, if you want to call me and have a conversation with me about what is my hardship and how we can phrase your hardship, I'm always happy to talk to listeners and walk you through how to do that kind of stuff. Or maybe if you say, hey, will you review my hardship letter? Now, a lot of you start calling, enough of you start calling, I've got to look out for my time as well. And so maybe there's a small fee involved there. But, if you have questions about a hardship letter, I do want you to reach out before I turn on the clock, before I try to get some money out of you. I will tell you, hey, yeah, I got plenty of time. Let's do it. No charge. Or, hey, I've got a week's worth of work piled up here. If I'm going to pull time away from a client, then maybe we can talk about some kind of arrangement. But regardless, give me a call. I always like hearing from listeners. I always like talking to listeners. I always like interacting with all of you. I get some of my greatest content, and I clearly get my greatest ideas to improve the show when I talk to all of you. So the last question I have here, how does debt settlement affect credit score? A lot of times I'll get from clients and they say, well, if we settle out this debt, how's that going to impact my credit score? Now, number one, your credit score, there's no way to settle this debt and maintain your credit score unless you pay the debt in full. So this $10,000 that you owe to Chase, the only way that it's not going to impact your credit is if you pay Chase $10,000. So if we end up settling with them for $3,000, it's going to impact your credit. If we settle with them on a payment plan, it's going to impact your credit. If we don't settle with them and they sue you for the $10,000, it's going to impact your credit. The only way that we can do this without impacting your credit is to pay the debt back in full. But one of the things that you need to remember, there are 5 factors that make up your credit score. Now, this is an entire podcast episode in and of itself, and maybe I'll do one later, but simply the 5 factors that make up your credit score. Your payment history is 35% of your score. Your credit utilization is 30% of your score. So just the payment history and the types of debt that you utilize, that's 65% of your score right there. The length of your credit history is 15% of your score. Your credit mix, so car loan, house loan, unsecured debt, other types of secured debt, your credit mix is 10%, and then any new credit is 10%. And so that's how your credit score is made up. There is no way to get you out of this debt for less than what you owe and not impact your credit score. What it's probably going to impact most is your payment history, because, like I said, you may have to make a decision to stop paying this particular card or these cards that you want to settle. It may impact your utilization. And then it may impact the length of your credit history. So one thing I would suggest is if the credit company is willing to leave the card open or the unsecured debt open even after you settle it, do it. But don't charge any more on that card. Because if it's an older card and you settle it away and that card goes away, now we've impacted the length of your credit history, because a card that you've had for a long time, a lot of reporting on your credit now goes away. And so you have less credit reporting for less period of time. And so that does ding your score a little bit. Now, another thing that I would look out for with these debt settlement companies, if they tell you your credit score will be impacted X amount of points, that's a red flag that maybe they don't know what they're talking about, because I don't know anyone that can tell you with absolute certainty doing activity X will impact your score by X number of points. What I do know is the larger the score, the larger the drop. So somebody with a 720 credit score that stops paying on a credit card, they may dip into the low 600s and have a 100+ point drop, where someone at 600 that doesn't pay their credit score or doesn't pay their credit card may only drop to like 550 and have a 50-point drop. So typically the larger the score, the larger the drop. But I don't know that there's anyone out there that can tell you, yeah, by doing X activity, your score is going to drop by X points. And the reverse, by doing X activity, your score is going to improve by X points. The people that I would avoid are the people that say we can remove whatever truthfulness has happened on your credit report. So if you filed bankruptcy and they say we can remove it immediately after the discharge is entered, that's a possible red flag. Credit repair companies can only improve things that are false on your credit. Now, maybe what they can do is they can say, okay, you filed bankruptcy and that eliminated these 10 cards. And so we're going to get these 10 cards off your credit because you no longer owe them money. That I would believe. But, the month after you get your bankruptcy discharge, we can get the bankruptcy off your credit. Unlikely to happen. Companies that say we can settle this and have no impact on your credit, unlikely to happen. If you say, I want to settle the debt and no impact to my credit score, unlikely to happen. But I think the thing to focus on here is you're out of the debt and your credit will always recover. So you got rid of $10,000 for $3,000. And yeah, your credit took a hit into the 600s, but if you do what you're supposed to do, if you pay the other cards, if you pay on your car, if you pay on your house, that credit score will increase over time. It may take a couple of years. What I've told clients is these things may be on your credit for 7 years, but they may only impact your credit for 2 or 3. So I've had people, again, I've told stories before. My best success story, I had clients that filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and within 2 years were able to buy a $300,000 house on a golf course near the water within 2 years. Now, again, is that going to happen for everybody? No. But they were able to improve their score, maintain their score enough, even after the bankruptcy, that to their lender, it didn't matter that the bankruptcy was 2 years ago, even though it was still on their credit, because they had done all this other stuff to improve their credit. So unfortunately, there's no way to get you out of this debt and still avoid having something on your credit. But where is the focus? I think the focus is on eliminating the debt and not on keeping your credit up, because you can always get credit back. We all started with 0 credit scores when we were born, and we had to build them up to the level that they're at. It's easy to do. We can always do that again. And we can utilize some of these companies to take the negative off of your credit, which again will improve your score. So, should I use a debt settlement company? Again, I tried to give you a whole list of factors that will factor into whether you should hire a debt settlement company or not. I will remind you, like I said at the beginning of the episode, Yesner Law also does negotiate with creditors. However, we are not a debt settlement company. What we will do, or a debt payment plan company, what we will do is we will negotiate with your creditor, and then once we've come to an agreement with your creditor, an agreement that we've run by you, an agreement that you approve, at that point we ask. So we do take a small fee up front, and again, if we can represent you, if this is something that interests you, we can always talk about it one-on-one in a phone call, in a Zoom chat, whatever. But we take a small fee up front to cover some admin time, and then we negotiate with your creditors. once we get an offer out of them, or we get some authority from you to make an offer to them, once we've sort of gotten that offer put together, we run it by you one more time to make sure that you're okay with it. And then we tell the creditor, yes, our client's okay with it, let's do it. Typically, they'll give us about 30 days to pay the settlement amount. And so if the settlement amount is unaffordable, we can then talk to the creditor about payment plan, and again, running it by you to make sure the payment plan is affordable. At that point, once we get the payment plan in place, once we get the lump sum settlement in place, then we ask you for money. And we'll ask you for the money that's owed to the creditor, and we'll ask you for a little bit more in attorney's fees to us for completing the negotiations. We will then send to the creditor. So you don't need to worry about sending the money to the creditor and having the creditor have access to all your bank accounts. We'll run this through our Florida Bar escrow account. We'll send it off to the creditor. We keep whatever fee or whatever portion is for us. So you don't really owe us any money. You owe us a little bit up front, and then you owe us money when we finally get it settled. You don't have to make us monthly payments to accumulate to have a war chest of money to negotiate with. So that's how we work. Should you choose a debt settlement company? Again, I think that's a decision that is totally up to you. We do work with a handful. We do have good relationships with a handful. If you're interested, I can recommend them to you offline. Again, give me a buzz. I'm happy to talk to any one of you about this topic. I'm always happy to help out a listener of the Crushing Debt podcast. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sticking with me for the length of the episode. I do want to remind you once again, check out our sponsor, Sam Cohen, at attorneysfirst.com. Also, would love it if you could promote to your friends and your colleagues, SeanMYesner.com/subscribe. If you enjoy the show, that is the best way to promote it to people that you want to also have listened to the show. SeanMYesner.com/subscribe. I'm putting a lot of other content in place, a lot of other things in place that I am happy to bring to you over the coming weeks. I've got other things planned with other podcasts that I am excited to bring to you over the coming weeks. But I think that will do it for this week's episode. I hope that at the end of the month you have more money, and not at the end of the money you have more month. I appreciate you all listening, and I'll talk to you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.